21. In this verse, although the real object is only to point out that in FAI not only the people of the present generation but the Muslims of the later periods and their future generations also have a share, yet, besides, the Muslims have also been taught an important moral lesson that they should never have any malice against other Muslims in their hearts. And they should continue to pray for the forgiveness of the Muslims who have gone before them instead of cursing and abusing them. The bond that binds the Muslims together is that of a common faith. If a person values his faith as the most important thing in his heart, inevitably he would be a well-wisher of all those people who are his brethren in faith. He can have ill will and malice and hatred towards them in his heart only when the value of the faith decreases in his sight, and he starts valuing other things more. Therefore, it is the requirement of faith that a believer's heart should be free from every trace of malice and hatred against the other believers. In this matter the best lesson is given by a hadith which Nasai has related from Anas. According to him, once it so happened that for 3 days continuously the Prophet, peace be upon him, declared in his assembly that a person was going to appear before them who belonged to the dwellers of paradise, and every time it would be a certain person from among the Ansar. At this Abdullah bin Amr bin As became curious as to what deeds the person concerned performed on the basis of which the Prophet, peace be upon him, had repeatedly given the good news of his admission to paradise. Thus, he made an excuse and spent 3 consecutive nights in his house to see how he performed his worship, but during the night he did not see anything unusual. At last, he asked him directly as to what special acts and devotions he performed on the basis of which the Prophet, peace be upon him, had given the great good news about him. He replied, "You have seen how I perform my worship. But there is one thing which might have carved me this reward. I do not harbor any malice or evil design against any Muslim, nor feel jealous of him on account of any good that Allah might have bestowed on him." This does not mean that if a Muslim finds an error in another Muslim's word or deed, he should avoid calling it an error. Faith does not demand this. But to describe an error as a mistake on the basis of an argument, and to state it to be so in a polite and decent manner is one thing, and harbor malice and hatred and resort to invective and abuse is quite another thing. It is wrong if one resorts to this in respect of his contemporaries, but worse if one resorted to this in respect of the dead people of the past. For the person indulging in such a thing would be a most filthy person, for he is not even inclined to forgive the dead. And the worst would be that a person should resort to invective and abuse in respect of those illustrious people who had done full justice to the Prophet's, peace be upon him, companionship in a period full of extreme tribulations and hardships, and had struggled with their lives to spread the light of Islam in the world and enabled us today to be blessed with the faith. One can hold any opinion if he thinks that such and such party of them was in the right and such in the wrong in its viewpoint and the differences that arose between them, and can even express his opinion in a reasonable and decent way, but to resort to exaggeration in support of one party so that the heart is filled with spite and hatred against the other is an evil which no God-fearing person would commit. Those who indulge in such a thing against the clear teaching of the Quran generally present the excuse that the Quran forbids to bear malice towards the believers, and the ones towards whom they bear the malice were not believers but hypocrites. But this allegation is even worse than the sin in defense of which the excuse is presented. For these very verses of the Quran, in the context of which Allah has taught the Muslims of the later generations not to bear malice towards the Muslims who have gone before them and to pray for their forgiveness, are sufficient to refute this allegation. In these verses 3 groups have been mentioned, one after the other, who are entitled to receive a share in FAI. The emigrants, the Ansar, and the Muslims coming after them, and the Muslims of the later periods have been enjoined that they should pray for the forgiveness of the Muslims who had embraced the faith before them. Obviously, in this context those who had embraced the faith before them could not be any other than the emigrants and the Ansar. Then Allah in verses 11 to 17 of this Surah Al-Hashr itself has told us who were the hypocrites. This makes it absolutely clear that the hypocrites were the people who had encouraged the Jews on the occasion of the battle of the Bani Nadir. As against them, the believers were those who were on the side of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in this battle. After this, can a Muslim who has any fear of God in his heart have the boldness to deny the faith of the people to whose faith Allah himself has borne the testimony? Imam Malik and Imam Ahmed, arguing from this verse, have expressed the opinion that there is no share in Fai for the people who malign the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Ibn al-Arabi, Akam al-Quran, Gayat al-Muntaha. But the Hanafis and the Shafi'is have not concurred with this, the reason being that Allah, while declaring the three groups to be entitled to Fai, has praised the conspicuous quality of each group, but none of these qualities is a condition which may determine whether a group should or should not be given a share in Fai. About the emigrants it has been said, they seek Allah's bounty and His goodwill, and are ever ready to succor Allah and His Messenger. This does not mean that an emigrant who lacks this quality is not entitled to have a share in Fai. About the Ansar, it has been said, they love those who have migrated to them and entertain no desire in their hearts for what is given to them and prefer others about themselves, even though they be needy themselves. This also does not mean that a member of the Ansar who has no love for the emigrants, and who is desirous of getting for himself what is being given to them, has no share in Fai. Therefore, the quality of the third group, that they pray for the forgiveness of those who embrace the faith before them, and they pray that they should not have any malice in their hearts towards any other believer, is also no condition to make one entitled to Fai. But this is in praise of a good quality, and an instruction as to what should be the attitude of the believers towards the other believers, and especially in respect of those believers who have gone before them.
أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا يَقُولُونَ لِإِخْوَانِهِمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ لَئِنْ أُخْرِجْتُمْ لَنَخْرُجَنَّ مَعَكُمْ وَلَا نُطِيعُ فِيكُمْ أَحَدًا أَبَدًا وَإِنْ قُوتِلْتُمْ لَنَنْصُرَنَّكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّهُمْ لَكَاذِبُونَ.
Did you not see the hypocrites say to their brethren, the unbelievers among the people of the book, if you are banished, we too will go with you and will not listen to anyone concerning you, and if war is waged against you, we will come to your aid, but Allah bears witness that they are liars.
22. From the style of this whole section, verses 11 to 17, it appears that it was revealed at the time when the Prophet, peace be upon him, had served a notice on the Bani and Nadir to leave Al-Madinah within 10 days, but had not yet laid siege to their quarters. As has been mentioned about, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, served the notice to the Bani and Nadir, Abdullah bin Ubay and other leaders of the hypocrites of Al-Madinah sent them a message to the effect that they would come to their aid with 2,000 men, and that the Bani Qurayza and the Bani Ghatafan would also rise in their support. Therefore, they should stand firm and should never surrender to the Muslims. For if the Muslims waged a war against him, they would fight them from their side, and if they expelled him, they also would go out with them. Thereupon Allah sent down these verses. Thus, chronologically this section is an earlier revelation and the first section a later revelation, when the Bani and Nadir had actually been driven out of Al-Madinah. But in the Quran the order of the two passages has been reversed for the reason that the subject matter of the first section is of greater importance.
لَئِنْ أُخْرِجُوا لَا يَخْرُجُونَ مَعَهُمْ وَلَئِنْ قُوتِلُوا لَا يَنْصُرُونَهُمْ وَلَئِنْ نَصَرُوهُمْ لَيُوَلُّنَّ الْأَدْبَارَ ثُمَّ لَا يُنْصَرُونَ.
To be sure, if they are banished, they will not go with them, and if war is waged against them, they will not aid them, and even if they provide any aid to them, they will still turn their backs, and thereafter no aid will be forthcoming to them.
لَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ رَهْبَةً فِي صُدُورِهِمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ.
Surely, they have greater dread for you in their hearts than for Allah. That is because they are a people who are devoid of understanding.
23. That is, the reason why they dare not face you openly in the field is not that they are Muslim, and have fear of God in their hearts, and are afraid that despite their claim to the faith, when they come out to help the disbelievers as against the believers, they will be held accountable before God. But what actually restrains them from facing you is that when they see your profound love and spirit of self-sacrifice and devotion for Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the great unity and concord in your ranks, they become dispirited. They know well that although you are few in number, the spirit of martyrdom which has turned each single individual among you into a gallant warrior, and the organization which has molded you into a solid body, will also crush them along with the Jews when they clash with you in the battlefield. Here one should bear in mind the fact that if a person harbors the fear of another than God in his heart, it is in fact a negation of the fear of God. Obviously, the person who considers one of the dangers as lesser and the other greater, pays no heed to the first but does whatever he can to safeguard himself against the greater danger. 24. A great truth has been expressed in this brief sentence. A person who has sense knows that the real power to be feared is the power of Allah, and not the power of men. Therefore, he will avoid every such thing as may call for the punishment of Allah, whether there is any human power to call him to account for it or not, and he will come out to accomplish any duty which Allah has enjoined on him, whether he is opposed and hindered by all the powers of the world. But a man, who has no sense, determines his attitude and conduct in view of the human powers, instead of Allah's power, in all matters of life, because Allah's power for him is imperceptible and human powers are perceptible. If he avoids something, he will avoid it, not because of the fear of Allah's punishment for it, but because of a human power, which may be there to take him to task. And if he does something he will do is not because Allah has enjoined it, but because some human power has ordered or approved of it, and will reward him for it. This very distinction between intelligence and folly, in fact, distinguishes the character and conduct of a believer from that of an unbeliever.
لا يقاتلونكم جميعا إلا في قرى محصنة أو من وراء جدر بأسهم بينهم شديد تحسبهم جميعا وقلوبهم شتى ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يعقلون.
They will never fight against you as a body in an open battlefield, and if they fight against you, they will fight only in fortified townships or from behind walls. Intense is their hostility to one another. You reckon them united while their hearts are divided. That is, because they are a people devoid of reason.
25. This refers to the second weakness of the hypocrites. The first weakness was that they were cowardly. They feared the men instead of fearing God and had no higher aim of life before them like the believers, which might impel them to fight for it even at the cost of life. And their second weakness was that they had no common tie between them except hypocrisy, which might unite them together into a strong band. The only thing that had brought them together was that they were all feeling highly upset at the flourishing leadership and rule of Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was an outsider in their city, and at the warm reception and help which their own compatriots, the Ansar, were giving to the emigrants. Because of this jealousy they wanted them to join hands together, and in conspiracy with the enemies of Islam of the surrounding areas should somehow put an end to this alien power and authority. But apart from this negative objective there was no positive common aim to unify them. Each of their chiefs had his own separate band, each craved for his own leadership. No one was sincere to the other, but each bore such jealousy and malice for the other that they could neither forget their mutual enmities nor desist from harming the other fatally even while facing those whom they regarded as their common enemy. Thus, at the outset, even before the battle against the Bani Nadir took place, Allah analyzed the internal state of the hypocrites and informed the Muslims that there was no real danger from their side. Therefore, they should not feel alarmed at the rumors that when they lay siege to the Bani Nadir, the leaders of the hypocrites would attack them from the rear with 2,000 men, and also bring the Bani Qurayza and the Bani Ghatafan along against them. All this was empty boasting which would be exposed at the very beginning of the trial.
كمثل الذين من قبلهم قريبا ذاقوا وبال أمرهم ولهم عذاب أليم.
They are like those who tasted the evil consequences of their deeds a short while before. A grievous chastisement awaits them.
26. The allusion is to the disbelievers of the Quraysh and the Jewish clan of the Bani Qaynuqa who had been defeated by a handful of ill-equipped Muslims in spite of their larger numbers and superior equipment, due mainly to these weaknesses.
They are like those who tasted the evil consequences of their deeds a short while before. This alludes to the pagans of the Quraysh and the Jews of the Qaynuqa tribe. As we know, despite their superiority in numbers and weapons, they were vanquished by a handful of ill-equipped Muslims because of these very weaknesses of theirs.
كمثل الشيطان إذ قال للإنسان اكفر فلما كفر قال إني بريء منك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين.
Their parable is that of Satan when he says to man, disbelieve. But when he disbelieves, he says, I am quit of you. Verily, I fear Allah, the Lord of the universe.
27. That is, these hypocrites are treating the Bani and Nadir in much the same way as Satan treats men. Today they are urging them to stand firm and go forth and clash with the Muslims, making them believe that they would come to their aid. But when they actually clash with the Muslims, they would renounce their pledges and promises and would never even look back to see their fate. The same way does Satan treat every disbeliever, and a similar treatment had he given to the disbelieving Quraysh at Badr, as has been mentioned in Surah Al-Anfal, Ayat 48. First, he incited them with false hopes and brought them out to confront the Muslims, saying, Today no one can overcome you, for I am with you. But when the two forces met in battle, he took to his heels, saying, I have nothing to do with you. I see that which you cannot see. Indeed, I fear Allah.
فكان عاقبتهما أنهما في النار خالدين فيها وذلك جزاء الظالمين.
In the end, both will be in the fire and will abide in it. That is the recompense of the wrongdoers.
أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون.
Believers, fear Allah and let every person look to what he sends forward for the morrow. Fear Allah. Allah is well aware of all that you do.
28. It is a rule of the Quran that whenever the hypocritical Muslims are taken to task for their hypocrisy, they are given admonition also so that whoever of them has some life left in his conscience may feel remorse for his conduct and attitude and may make an effort, out of the fear of Allah, to come out of the pit into which his worship of the self has thrown him. This whole section, verses 18 to 24, consists of such admonition. 29. For tomorrow, for the hereafter. That is, this whole worldly life is, today, whose, tomorrow, is the day of resurrection, which is going to follow it. Adopting this style, Allah has, in a wise manner, made man understand the truth that just as that person is highly foolish, who gambles away his all for the enjoyment of today and does not realize whether tomorrow he would be left with anything to eat and a place of shelter or not, so is also that person only working for his own doom, who is too absorbed in making his world to pay heed to the hereafter. Whereas the hereafter is to follow this world just as today is to be followed by tomorrow. And there he would find nothing if he has sent nothing ahead for the morrow. Besides, the other wise point here is that every person has been appointed his own censor. Unless a person develops in himself the sense of what is good for him, and what is evil, he cannot appreciate whether what he is doing will make his future in the hereafter or mar it. And when this sense becomes active in himself, he will have to calculate and see for himself whether the way in which he is spending his time, his wealth, his energies and capabilities leads to heaven or hell. To do so is in his own interest, for if he does not do so he will ruin his own future itself. 30.
ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون.
And be not like those who forgot Allah, and so He made them oblivious of themselves. They are the wicked ones.
That is, forgetfulness of God inevitably leads to forgetfulness of one's own self. When man forgets that he is slave to the Almighty, he will inevitably form a wrong view of his position in the world, and his whole life will go wrong because of this basic error. Likewise, when he forgets that he is slave to nobody except Allah, he does not serve the one whose slave actually he is not. This also is a grave and all-pervading misunderstanding, which corrupts his whole life. Man's real position in the world is that of a slave. He is not free and self-sufficient, and he is slave of only one God, and is no one else's slave beside him. The person who does not know this truth, does not in fact know himself. And the person who, in spite of knowing this, forgets it at any moment, may commit an act at that very moment, which a disbeliever, or a polytheist, or a man forgetful of God only would commit. Man's remaining firm and steadfast on the right path entirely depends on his remembering God at all times. For as soon as he becomes heedless of Him, he becomes heedless of himself, and this very heedlessness turns him into sinfulness.
لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون.
Those destined for the fire and those destined for paradise cannot be alike. Verily, it is those destined for paradise who shall triumph.
لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون.
Had we sent down this Quran upon a mountain, you would indeed have seen it humbling itself and breaking asunder out of fear of Allah. We propound such parables to people that they may reflect. You would indeed have seen it humbling.
31. The parable means that if a huge creation like a mountain had the sense and knowledge that it had been made responsible and accountable, like man, before Allah Almighty, for its deeds, it would have trembled from the fear of it. But how heedless, senseless and thoughtless is the man, who understands the Quran, and has known the whole truth through it, yet he is neither seized by any fear nor feels worried as to what answer he would make to his God about the responsibilities that have been placed on him. On the contrary, when he reads the Quran, or hears it being read, he remains unmoved as if he were a lifeless and senseless stone, which is not supposed to hear and see and understand anything. For further explanation, see Yen 120 of Surah Al-Hashr.
هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم.
He is Allah. There is no God but He, the knower of the unseen and the manifest. He is the most merciful, the most compassionate.
32. These verses explain what kind of God He is, and what are His attributes, who has sent this Quran to you, who has placed these responsibilities on you, and before whom you have to render an account of your deeds in the end. This mention of the divine attributes immediately after the above theme automatically gives man the feeling that he has not to deal with an ordinary being but with Almighty Allah who has such and such attributes. Here, One should also understand that although in the Quran, the attributes of Allah Almighty have been stated in a unique way, which gives a clear concept of the Divine Being, there are two places where the attributes of Allah have been mentioned in a most comprehensive way, in the verse of the Al-Kursi, Al-Baqarah, Ayat 255, and in these verses of Surah Al-Hashr. 33. That is, He is the one besides whom none else has the rank, position, attributes and powers of Godhead so that He may be worshipped and served as God. 34. That is, He knows whatever is hidden from the creatures as well as whatever is known and visible to them. Nothing of this universe is unknown to Him. He directly knows whatever has happened in the past, whatever exists at present, and whatever will happen in the future. He does not stand in need of any means or medium of knowledge. 35. That is, He alone is the being whose mercy is limitless, which covers the whole universe and blesses and benefits everything in it. None else in the world is the bearer of such all-pervading, infinite mercy. The mercy of every other being, characterized by the ability of mercy, is partial and limited, and that quality too is not essentially its own, but bestowed by the Creator for a specific need and purpose. He has created the quality of mercy for some other creature. He has created it in order to make one creature a means for the development and well-being of the other creature. This by itself is a proof that Allah's mercy is infinite.
هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون.
He is Allah. There is no God but He, the King, the Holy, the All-Peace, the Giver of Security, the Overseer, the Most Mighty, the Overpowering, the All-Great. Exalted be He from whatever they associate with Him, the King.
36. The word used in the original is Al-Malik, which means that He alone is the real sovereign. Moreover, the word Al-Malik in its general sense also gives the meaning that He is king of the entire universe and not of a particular region or of a specific country. His sovereignty and rule comprehends the entire universe. He is master of everything. Everything submits itself to His command and power and authority, and there is nothing to delimit His sovereignty. At different places in the Quran all aspects of Allah's sovereignty have been presented and explained fully, and whoever exists in the heavens and the earth belongs to Him. All are obedient to Him. Surah Ar-Rum, Ayat 26. He administers the affairs of the world from the heavens to the earth. Surah As-Sajdah, Ayat 5. To Him belongs the dominion of the earth and the heavens, and all matters are referred to Him for decision. Surah Al-Hadid, Ayat 5. He has no partner in His sovereignty. Surah Al-Furqan, Ayat 2. In His hand is the absolute control of everything. Surah Yasin, Ayat 83, doer of whatever He wills. Surah Al-Burj, Ayat 16, He is accountable to none for what He does, but all others are accountable to Him. Surah Al-Anbiya, Ayat 23, Allah rules and there is none to reverse His decrees. Surah Ar-Ra'd, Ayat 41, the being who gives protection while none can give protection against Him. Surah Al-Mu'min, Ayat 88. Say, O Allah, Sovereign of the kingdom, You bestow kingdom on whomever You will, and You take it away from whomever. 38. The word as-salam as used in the original means peace and secure. Allah, You will. You exalt whomever You will and You abase whomever You will. All that is good is in Your power. Indeed You have full power over all things. Surah Al-Imran, Ayat 26. These explanations make it abundantly clear that Allah is not king in some limited or metaphoric sense, but He is real king in the most perfect and complete sense of sovereignty. As a matter of fact, if sovereignty in its true sense is at all found somewhere, it is found only in Allah's kingship. Apart from this, wherever it is claimed to be, whether in the person of a king or dictator, or in a class or group or family, or in some nation, he or it possesses no sovereignty at all, for sovereignty is not a gift, which may at one time be granted and at another time withdrawn, which may be in danger of being usurped, the establishment and existence of which may be temporary and temporal, and the sphere of power and authority of which may be circumscribed and restricted by many other conflicting powers. 37. Al-Qudus is a superlative. It means that Allah is far exalted that He should have a fault or defect or demerit. He is the purest being. No evil can be imagined about Him. Here, one should clearly understand that the attribute of holiness is a foremost accompaniment of sovereignty. Man's intellect and nature refuse to believe that a being who is the bearer of sovereignty may be mischievous, ill-behaved, ill-natured, who may be characterized with these base qualities, from whose power and authority his subjects might be in danger of suffering evil instead of being blessed with good. That is why wherever man thinks sovereignty is centered, he assumes holiness also to be there, even if it is not there, for absolute sovereignty is inconceivable without holiness. But obviously, there is no real sovereign, nor can there be, except Allah, who is the Holy. Whether it is monarchy, or sovereignty of the people, or dictatorship of the socialist system, or some other form of human rule, in any case holiness for it is inconceivable. 38. The word as-Salam as used in the original means peace and secure. Allah's being called as-Salam means that He is peace and safety personified. He is far exalted that some calamity or weakness or defect should befall Him, or His perfection should suffer a decline or blemish. 39. The word al-Mu'min is derived from ammonius, which means to secure from fear, and Mu'min is one who provides security to others. Allah has been called al-Mu'min in the sense that He provides security to His creatures. His creatures are secure from the fear that He would ever wrong them, or deprive them of their rights, or allow their rewards to go to waste, or would violate the promises He has made with them. Then, since no object has been mentioned with this subject, but the epithet of al-Mu'min has been used absolutely, it automatically gives the meaning that His security comprehends the entire universe and all that it contains. 40. The word al-Muhaymin has three meanings. 1. The guardian and protector. 2. The observer who sees what everyone does. 3. The being who has taken up the responsibility to fulfill the needs and requirements of the people. Here also, since the word al-Muhaymin has been used absolutely, and no object has been mentioned of this subject, therefore, it by itself gives the implied meaning that He is guarding and protecting all creatures, is watching the acts and deeds of everyone, and has taken up the responsibility of sustaining and providing for every creature in the universe with its needs and requirements. 41. Al-Aziz, such an almighty being against whom no one may dare raise his head, no one may have the power to resist His decrees, before whom everyone may be helpless and powerless. 42. The word al-Jabbar as used in the original is derived from jabr, which means setting something right by use of power, reforming something by force. Allah has been called al-Jabbar in the sense that He sets the system of His universe right by the use of power, and enforces His will, which is entirely based on wisdom. Moreover, the word jabr also contains the meaning of greatness and glory. Thus, a palm tree which is too tall for the people to pluck its fruit is called jabr in Arabic. Likewise, an act which is grand and glorious is called amal jabbar. 43. The word al-Mutakabir has two meanings. 1. The one who is not actually great but poses as great. 2. The one who is actually great and sets himself up as such. Whether it is man or Satan, or some other creature, since greatness does not, in fact, belong to it, its posing itself as great and claiming superiority over others is a false claim and a vice. Contrary to this, Allah Almighty is truly great and greatness actually belongs to Him, and everything in the universe is low and insignificant as against Him. Therefore, His being great and setting Himself up as great is no false claim but reality. It is not an evil quality but a virtue and excellence, which no one else has but Allah.
هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم.
He is Allah, the planner, executor, and fashioner of creation. His are the names most beautiful. Whatever is in the heavens and the earth extols His glory. He is the most mighty, the most wise.
44. That is, those who regard a creature as an associate in His powers, authority, attributes, or in His being, in fact, utter a grave falsehood, for Allah is far exalted that anybody or anything should be an associate with Him in any sense. 45. That is, the entire world and everything in it, from the initial plan of its creation till its coming into existence in its final, finished form, is entirely Allah's work of creation. Nothing has come into existence by itself nor come about accidentally, nor has anyone else the least share in its creation and development. Here, Allah's act of creation has been described in 3 separate stages, which take place one after the other. First is the stage of khalq, which means to ordain, or to plan. It is like an engineer's conceiving the design of a building, which he intends to build for a specific purpose and draws out its detailed diagram and model. The second stage is bar, which actually means to separate, to cut, to split asunder. The Creator has been called al-Bari in the sense that He enforces the plan He has conceived and brings out the thing from non-existence into existence. It is analogous to the engineers putting marks on the ground of the full measurements of the building according to the plan, digging the foundations, raising the walls and completing all the practical preliminaries of the construction work. The third stage is taswir, which means to give shape. Here it implies giving something its final complete shape. In all these 3 stages there is no resemblance whatever between Allah's work and human works. None of human plans is such as may not have been derived from previous models and plans. But each of Allah's plans is unique and His own original creation. Whatever man makes, He makes it by combining the substances created by Allah. He does not bring anything from non-existence into existence, but composes and constructs by different methods whatever is present and available. Contrary to this, Allah has brought everything from non-existence into creation, and the substance itself of which He has made the universe is created by Him. Likewise, in the matter of giving shape also man is not the inventor but an imitator, and only a poor imitator. The real maker of forms and shapes is Allah, who has given a unique and matchless shape to every species and individual and has never repeated exactly the same shape or form. 46. Names imply the adjectives, and His are the excellent names, means that those adjectives which indicate or express some kind of defect are not appropriate for Him. He should be remembered by those names which express His attributes of perfection. In the Quran these beautiful names of Allah have been mentioned here and there, and in the Hadith 99 names of that exalted and pure being have been enumerated which Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah have related on the authority of Abu Hurairah. If one studies these names as mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith carefully, he can easily understand what words would be appropriate and suitable if one has to remember Allah in another language. 47. That is, everything proclaims with the tongue, or otherwise, that its Creator is free from every fault and defect, weakness and error. 48. For explanation, see Yen 2 of Surah.